All right, it's a go. We decided to have Bible study. Genesis chapter 29. Oh, we got some good stuff tonight. Genesis 29. And let's have a word of prayer and we'll get started. Father, thank you for the rain. And thank you for a place for us to climb into that's dry. But most of all, we thank you for your word that is so readily accessible to us still. And that we can go back in time and your Holy Spirit can walk us through the beginnings of the nation of Israel, what it means for us, and we can see your mighty power. I pray tonight that your Spirit would have a chance to speak to us and to show us some things here that maybe we've not seen before or have forgotten, that we might just marvel in your grace and love in Jesus' name. Amen. So, here we are, chapter 29, and last week we had this crazy thing happen where it was like The Bachelor, and he had two ladies there, and I don't watch the show, so I don't know if this could happen or not, but he picked one and he got the other. Can't happen? No. Because we know who he'd give the rose to, but he woke up in the morning and different girl. Wow. So, let's start. Tim, you're up. Read 21 through 30, please.
When Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, my time is completed, and I want to make love to her." So Laban brought together all the people of the palace of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What have you done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you her younger one also, in return for another 7 years' work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years.
You know, if that really was the custom, that would have been helpful to have known that the night before. Yeah, instead of just finding out about it in the morning. Really? That's the custom? Okay. Nicholas? Now that you're all moisturized, ready? Verses 31 through 35.
When the Lord saw that Leah was neglected, he opened her womb, but Rachel was unable to conceive. Leah conceived, gave birth to a son, and named him Reuben. For she said, "The Lord has seen my afflictions, surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, "The Lord heard, and I neglected, and has given me this son also." She named him Simeon. She conceived again, gave birth to a son, and said, "At last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne 3 sons for him." Therefore he was named Levi. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and said, "This time I will praise the Lord." Therefore she named him Judah. When Leah stopped giving stopped giving children. When Rachel saw, oh, is that it?
Nope, stop. Stop. Okay. Leah was really the responsible for most of the tribes. She had 6 of the 12 boys. And one of them was so important in the lineage because it was from this boy, not Rachel, but Leah. In verse 35, this is where the Messiah came. Who did she have? Judah, the Lion of Judah. This is where Jesus came from. So, Reuben, you might think that means sauerkraut, but no, it doesn't. Reuben means see a son. I love Reuben sandwiches, yeah. That's one of my favorite sandwiches, Reuben. But it means see a son. And what do you think Leah is saying by naming him that? Look at me. Yeah. Hey, mister, look at me. I gave you a son. Then, and of course, she was thinking that if she had a boy, what would that do for her marriage? Make her husband love her.
But not loving.
Yeah, that's right. So, she conceives again. And this time, names him Simeon, and that means one who hears. Who's she talking about? The Lord. God is listening to me. And she's right? Because her hope for Reuben didn't pan out. Her husband's still not loving her. So she's crying out to God. He hears, gives her another son, conceives again, and this time she has Levi. And Levi means attached. And what's her reason for naming him that? Why does she name him Levi? Yes, hoping that through this, 3 boys. Jacob ought to be attached to me. And then finally, she has Judah, and that name means praise. And I don't know if she's changing her mind, changing her outlook, changing her hopes, but here she's focusing on praising God for this 4th boy. Okay. 1 through 13, Nicole, of chapter 30.
When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she envied her sister. "Give me sons or I will die," she said to Jacob. Jacob became angry with Rachel and said, "Am I in God's place, who has withheld offspring from you?" Then she said, "Here is my maid Bilhah. Go sleep with her, and she'll bear children for me, so that through her I too can build a family." So Rachel gave her slave Bilhah to Jacob as a wife, and he slept with her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Rachel said, God has vindicated me. Yes, he has heard me and given me a son. So she named him Dan. Rachel's slave Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Rachel said, in my wrestlings with God, I have wrestled with my sister and won, and she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her slave Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, what good fortune, and she named him Gad. When Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a second son, Leah said, I am happy that the woman called me happy. So she named him Asher. Was that it?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
So we got, now we've got more women in the mix. And Rachel, she's kind of a high maintenance bridezilla. And she's looking at Jacob. And when she makes this statement, verse 1 of chapter 30, that could be construed as if she's blaming who? Huh? Who's Rachel blaming in chapter 30, verse 1? She's blaming Jacob. I think he's proven 4 times that he's not the problem. Wouldn't you say? Give me children or I'll die. What are you saying, woman? But he does it right. He says, my God. And then he's just as truthful. He said, you're the one. It's your problem, not mine. And this verse 1, commentators have said this is what's called the Rachel's rash prayer, because God eventually does give her children and she dies. So that's kind of icky thing to think about. So Rachel says, okay, then I heard about this from my ancestors with Abe and Rahab. Here's Bilhah. Go have a kid with her. And Rachel takes the credit for it because that's how they did it in those days. So she gets to name the kid, and she names him Dan. And that means vindication or judgment. And then she goes and has another kid with Bilhah, and this one is called Naphtali, and that means wrestler or struggle, because she is in competition with her sister and she thinks she's winning. Oh, Rachel. So, all of a sudden Leah says, hey, I've hit a lull here. And my competition's, catching me. It's 4-2. So go into Zilpah, and she names him Gad, good luck, fortune. And then she names the second one Asher, which means happy. And Kim, 14 through 22. Read 20 through 24. Yeah, 14 through 24.
Now in the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. And Rachel Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Is it a small matter for you to take my husband? And would you take my son's mandrakes also?" So Rachel said, "Therefore he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." When Jacob came in from the field in the evening, then Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes." So he lay with her that night. God gave heed to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has given me my wages because I gave my maid to my husband." So she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again and bore a sixth son to Jacob. Then Leah said, "God has endowed me with a good gift. Now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him 6 sons." So she named him Zebulun. Afterwards she bore a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb. So she conceived and bore a son and said, "God has taken away my reproach." She named him Joseph, saying, "May the Lord give me another son."
Mandrakes are still around today, and they're kind of an exotic plant, and they are poisonous, so you have to be kind of careful how you prepare them. You just can't go out and pluck out a mandrake off the ground and start eating it, or you'd be dead. So you have to be careful. But what gives them that name, mandrakes, is that when you pull them up, the roots kind of resemble people. And some of them look like boys, and some of them look like girls, but they never have she-drakes. It's always just mandrakes. And they had this superstition that they were not an aphrodisiac, but an enhancer of fertility. And so Rachel says, "I want some of those." She doesn't have any children of her own to get them, so she makes a deal with these boys of Leah's and says, "Tell your mom she can sleep with Jacob tonight. I want those mandrakes." And, you know, he's got feelings. He's a human being. He's not just a piece of meat. You just, use him for whatever you want. These women are just going nuts. And anyways, he comes in from the field. He's hot, he's tired. And Rachel says, Leah says, "No, you're coming to bed because I paid for you." So she has a baby, names him Issachar, and what in the world does that mean? Oh, wages. Yeah, paid for him. So the name means wages. Then she has another one, Zebulun, and that means honor. And still not working for Rachel. Sixth son, and this one is called Zebulun. And then she has a girl. And finally, God gives Rachel a baby, and he's named Joseph. So, 11 rugrats, well, 12 if you count Dinah. 11 rugrats running around, and I guess we'll get to that in a minute. "14 years he's been there. First 7 years, He had no kids. And then because wasn't married. So in the last 7 years, he's had was it 8? 8 boys and a girl? How many kids has he got? Leah's had 6. And then 5 more boys. Yeah. So there's been 11 boys and a girl in 7 years. Whew. He's just been used, that's all. It's just disgusting that they would, treat him like that when, he's a human being, for goodness sake. Now, after 14 years, it doesn't say this here, but Jewish tradition says Jacob wanted to leave and Laban wouldn't let him. And was holding the kids and the girls hostage. So we come here to verse 25. And Sally, would you read 25 through 29?
Mm-hmm. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages and I will pay them." Laban said to him, "You know how I have worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?"
Keep going.
"What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." "Agreed," said Laban. "Let me be as you have said." That same day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had been white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Let me still go?
Go, right there.
Jacob, however, took fresh
Stop. That's good. Laban said, "No, I don't want you leaving. I don't want you taking my family away from me. I have divined through whatever he used, tea leaves or whatever, that God's blessed you." And the word he used for God is Jehovah. He's talking about the God that Abraham's worshipped. And that's because Laban, in his background, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, had knowledge of this God, Jehovah. And Jacob says, "But listen, the reason that your flocks and herds have grown so much is because of me. So I don't want you giving me my wages. I want to do this. Let's separate all of the livestock. And I'm trying to get this. And I'm not sure, and they're not real clear about verse 33. In verse 33, when they divide these, well, I shouldn't say 33, verse 35, because doesn't it seem to you that 34, Laban is talking, so Laban's the one that removed the striped, the speckled, and the black from the rest of the herd? Does it sound that way, that Laban's the one talking in verse 35, or is it Jacob?
Jacob, because it says, so he removed, and at the end of that, it says, and gave them into the care of his sons. So who's his and the sons? To me, I interpret that as Jacob's sons.
Okay.
I don't know.
And then Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks.
Yep.
Okay. 3 days distance. So normally, chances of having a black sheep and ring-streaked or speckled or spotted goats, goats were normally dark, sheep were normally light. And Jacob said, the way we're going to know what is right is I'm going to take the rarities. I'm going to take the light-colored goats and the dark-colored sheep. And you look in my flocks, and if there is dark-colored goats or light-colored sheep, you know I've stolen them. Laban says, cha-ching, this is going to be good for me because they don't have that kind. Just once in a while. So he took those small numbers away from Laban. And in this rest of the thing here, verses 37 through 43, what Moses is telling us is Jacob is like a lot of people in thinking that God needs help. And he wants to multiply his numbers. And so he goes through all of this weirdness. In this isn't science. It's not, you don't learn this in veterinary school. You can't peel bark off of a tree, have two animals mate in front of it, and the kid's striped. It doesn't work that way. But Jacob is the superstitious, all on his own guy. And so in verses 37 through 43, he's doing things thinking that this is him, that he's responsible for this. Now, a couple of things are good. He's looking at the flock, and every time there's one that's feeble, he sends them over to Laban. And he keeps the strong ones. Now, that's good. But as far as the coloring and the spots and all of that, Jacob has nothing to do with it. That's all God. Because God's blessing him. God's watching over him. God's protecting him. Yeah, me too.
Talking in 34.
Yeah.
So if we switch it to Jacob talking in 35, then who's talking in 36? Because I thought Jacob left. I didn't think Laban left. then 36 would make it seem like Laban left.
Well, who's the himself and Jacob? So we put 3 days distance between himself and Jacob.
Yeah, so there's how we know it's Laban, because
That's what I'm saying, so it's Laban that's been talking from 34, 35, and 36.
Well,
And Laban was the one that left?
it seems that way in that. it didn't
Jacob's
say
sons
himself.
took the flock. Jacob's deed.
Mhm.
yeah, Jacob sent it with the boys. Because Jacob sent when they divided up the group, Jacob sent the speckled and all of those with his sons, 3 days' journey. And he stayed there with Laban's flocks. Because at this point in time, I don't know how or if Laban has any boys. He just had girls. So, however that went, we've got a group that are normal colors for sheep and goats, and then we have a group that are abnormal sheep and goats. And Jacob took the abnormal ones. That's how it starts. We're going to find out later, it just keeps switching. And that's how we know God's in it. So, Jacob gets prosperous. Large flocks, female, male servants, camels, donkeys, the works. He's got all of this coming to him, and he's just becoming enormously wealthy. And all of a sudden the scene changes. So Pauline, would you read chapter 31, verses 1 through 16?
Everything our father owned and has gained all his wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you." So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, "I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, 'The speckled ones will be your wages,' then all the flocks give birth to speckled young. And if he said, 'The streaked ones will be your wages,' then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flock were straight, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, 'Jacob.' I answered, 'Here I am.' And he said, 'Look up and see what the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen them all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you have anointed a pillar, and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land.' Then Rachel and Leah replied, 'Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what he was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you.'"
We get to chapter 31, and there's a change. Jacob arrived penniless. Now he's wealthy. When he first got there, remember he come up onto the well? And who was taking care of the sheep? Laban's daughters. There was no mention of sons. But now it's been 20 years. And all of a sudden, Jacob's got sons. Now you look at verse 1 of 31, And you tell me how these sons came to that conclusion. And where did they hear it? At the supper table. Yeah, Laban, he's at the supper table. There's the boys sitting around it. He says, you know, that Jacob, he is turning me into a pauper. He's stealing everything. And boys, I want you to know something. If you don't have any inheritance left, blame your sister's husband. That thief has taken everything. Well, the boys, they believe it. And so they start to talk. And Jacob says, I can tell the attitude's changed. No duh. And then God says, and I don't know if he said this verbally or if Jacob just said, you know, I think God's trying to make me move. I think it's time to go. So he asks the girls, what do you think? Now, when Jacob married the girls, who did Laban give the dowry to? Because in a marriage back in the Oriental, the bride's father gave a dowry for each of the girls. Who did Laban give the dowry to? He kept it. There wasn't anybody to give it to. Nuts. No father of the groom. I guess I'll just have to keep it. And the girls said, not only has he cheated our husband, he's cheated us. He took that money, our dowry, and instead of giving it to Jacob's family, he kept it. In essence, he sold us. So we don't have any loyalties at all. We're with you. If you want to go, we're ready to go. And notice in verse 8 how many times Laban changed. And he would say, no, I've changed my mind. You take all the light-colored sheep and the dark-colored goats, and I'll take the opposite. And as soon as he said that, then all of Jacob's animals were that color. That's why I know it wasn't him, it was God. And so he is, he's got permission from his wives, and that's always important. Got to get permission from your wives. And taking notes? Yeah. Write that down on your table. Get permission from your wife. So he got that, and he's got his kids, and they're already herding the flocks. So that's where this Jewish tradition comes in, that 7 years earlier, Jacob had asked to leave and Laban said no. So this time, Amy, ready? Chapter 31, beginning in verse 17, down through 32.
Then Jacob arose and put his children and his wife on camels, and he drove away all his livestock and all his property which he had gathered, his acquired livestock which he had gathered in Padan Aram, to go to the land of Canaan to his father Isaac. When Laban had gone to shear his flock, then Rachel stole the household idols that were her father's. And Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was fleeing. So he fled with all that he had, And he arose and crossed the Euphrates River and set his face toward the hill country of Gilead. When it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob had fled, then he took his kinsmen with him and pursued him a distance of 7 days' journey, and he overtook him in the hill country of Gilead. God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." Laban caught up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country, and Laban with his kinsmen camped in the hill country of Gilead. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done by deceiving me and carrying away my daughters as captives of the sword? Why did you flee secretly and deceive me and did not tell me so that I might have sent you away with joy and with songs, with timbrel and with lyre, and did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, 'Be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob.' Now you have indeed gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods?" Then Jacob replied to Laban, "Because I was afraid, for I thought that you would take your daughters from me by force. The one with whom you find your gods shall not live. In the presence of her kinsmen, point out what is yours among my belongings and take it for yourself." For Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them.
3 days head start. But he has got lots of livestock. It's not just where their people are running for cover. They've got to drive all of these animals. So they're slow. So even though they had a 3-day head start, Laban catches them in 7 days. And he comes up with the old, "I'm offended. I'm the victim here. Oh, poor me, you ran away. I didn't get to kiss my babies goodbye." Rachel is not only bridezilla, but she is a talent. The gods, why did they all have these gods? What did they do with these gods? Yeah, but couldn't Rachel worship God where she was going? What's she taking the gods for? Any idea? Protection and blessing, because in this day and age, these people thought, and this is why Jacob was so befuddled at Bethel when he first left home. These people thought that gods were in a certain place. So that if you were worshiping God here in Kent County and you got transferred to Detroit or Port Huron or Saginaw, you'd have to take gods with you because your gods are in Kent County. And they had little idols. And so they took them because they didn't think gods moved. So Rachel's taken these gods that belong to her dad, but there's more to it than that.
He stole her inheritance.
Both girls think that.
Is that to try to get back at him?
In that culture, if you had these personal effects that belonged to Laban, you could come back later and claim family inheritance. Now, we're going to go in time, and there's going to be a girl named Tamar, and she's going to be promised to who was that? Help me out. Who's Tamar's father-in-law?
Is it Perez?
That's one of the kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But who was Perez's father? Remember the story? Sheep shearing time. His wife, in,
Judah was the father of Perez, and Zerah by Tamar.
yeah, and Judah's wife died. I think that's it. Because he goes up, sheep shearing time, he goes up to where they're having the sheep shearing, and Tamar, who was promised to Judah's son, never gets hooked up. And so she dresses herself as a prostitute. And Judah goes in, she gets pregnant, they're going to stone her, and she said, before you kill me, these belong to the father of my baby. And they were Judah's. Rachel's going to have Laban's gods. So she could come back years later and say, this land all belongs to me. And they said, well, how do you say that? I've got the gods that prove that. So Laban's mad. I mean, it's just more than a religious thing. This is financial. And he says, you know, it's bad enough that you stole my kids away and you did this and you did that, and I'm so sad about losing them, blah, blah, blah. And now, why did you steal my gods? And Jacob, what a man. Just go through my stuff, and whoever stole it, kill him. Oh, so he goes through the whole tent. Well, let's read that. Okay, so you want to read it or not, Mark? We're going to be at verse 33 through 42. 33.
Yes, chapter 31.
Yeah, chapter 31, verse 33. Sorry.
33 through what?
42.
And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, and into the two maids' tents, but he did not find them. Then he went out of Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household idols, put them in the camel's saddle, and sat on them. And Laban searched all about the tent, but did not find them. And she said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me. And he searched but did not find the household idols. Then Jacob was angry and rebuked Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that you have so hotly pursued me? Although you have searched all my things, what part of your household things have you found? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us both. These 20 years I have been with you. Your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried their young, and I have not eaten the rams of your flock. That which was torn by beasts I did not bring to you. I bore the loss of it. You required it from my hand, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. There I was, and day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from my eyes. Thus I have been in your house 20 years. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac has been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night.
Okay. What if he was a dad, so maybe he knew better than go into the boys' tent. Couldn't find anything in there anyways. That'd just be a mess. But he goes into the tents, doesn't find anything. Rachel, you see how crafty she is? Now, they all, even before the law of Moses, way back here, when it was that time of the month for a woman, she was considered to be unclean, and anything she touched was unclean. So the irony is, she not only has stolen Laban's gods, she has defiled Laban's gods by setting on them. I don't know if it is or not.
Not only a thief, she's a liar.
Yeah, she's dishonest. So she says, I'd get up, but I can't. You understand, right, Dad? Oh, yeah. I'm so sorry. I even thought of it. And so he didn't search her. And then Jacob tees off on him. But I want you to go back here. I want to see this. In this section of Scripture, in chapter 31, we have the most remarkable example of God's amazing love for us, His creation. Just amazing. I want you to see verse 24 and verse 29. Read those, Jojo. 24 and 29.
God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, "Be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad." And 29 you said?
Yep.
It is in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, "Be careful not to speak either good or bad to Jacob."
Is this the first occurrence we've ever read about God speaking to somebody about how they're to treat others? First person was Abraham, right? He'd lied about his wife. God didn't speak to Abraham. God spoke to Pharaoh. And then when Abraham did it again, God spoke to Abimelech. And then Isaac did the same thing, lied about his wife. And again, God spoke to Abimelech. And when God spoke to those men, what did, in effect, if you're going to wrap this up in a bow, in effect, what did God tell those men? Do not harm my people. And what did those men do? They listened. Here, God speaks to Laban. And what does he say? Yeah, don't harm my son. Jacob is my boy. Don't harm him. Do you see God's amazing love? Whenever God spoke to someone, they did it, even if they didn't want to. Even if they didn't believe in God, when God spoke to these people, they did exactly what God said. God could have spoken to every human being on earth and said, "Accept my son." But he didn't.
Comes over them to do as he said, as compared to having turned their hearts to believe in him? Because that's not his purpose in these examples.
The purpose in these examples is to prevent them from doing what they normally would do. I think in this case, Katrina, I think this is a perfect example of the power of our God of the universe, who can make any person, any animal, any object do exactly what he says. You can't argue. When God says do it, you did it. I mean, even creation. But when it came to salvation, He allowed us to choose. Now, on one hand, that's just crazy. But aren't you glad that he gives us freedom to make that choice? But we think about sometimes not. Man, if God could just make everybody straighten up. God is so amazing in his love for us that he would allow us to do really stupid things and still save us. And still save us. Okay, I got a sweet girl in Mason, Ohio that's watching by herself tonight because my son, her husband, is up in Michigan. And I said I would give a shout out to Lindsay. So we're done. 3 minutes early.